This House is now in session. Minutes of the 19th of October 2018.
Ready? Deferred? Deferred? Ready? Okay. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of the Honourable House of Assembly at its meeting of Tuesday, October the 18th.
Friday, October the 19th.
Sorry, Friday, October the 19th, which have been circulated, be taken as read.
If there are no observations or corrections, let those minutes stand confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honour the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that standing orders numbers 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that those aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are so suspended.
Pedro. Where is that one in here? Because I just seen cuffs in here. I just seen cuffs. Where's Chancery?
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 4, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Rural Development, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Chancery Lane in the parish of Christchurch in this island, for the public purpose of housing development.
The honourable member for St. Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, the resolution before the House is seeking permission to vest 14.23 hectares, approximately 35 acres of land at Chancery Lane, Christchurch, in the National Housing Corporation for Housing Development. It is really a holdover from the last administration, and when they demitted office after the 24th of May, this resolution, even though they had agreed for it to be vested in the National Housing Corporation, it was not completed. The Cabinet had agreed since the 7th of December 2017 to have this vesting done. They had approved it at that time. It is a parcel of land that was acquired by the Crown by deed of conveyance since the 8th of October 1965 from Oldbury Estates Limited, and the conveyance being recorded on the 30th of November 1965. The approval was done in March, and this resolution now seeks to vest it in the National Housing Corporation. I must say that this, the land, even while this was not done during our time, it is within the perimeters of land which we have earmarked for acquisition. Land, Mr. Speaker, which is on the periphery of existing villages. And these parcels of land are normally acquired or not normally vested in the National Housing Corporation for persons who are unable to purchase land at the usual market price. Land which is sometimes utilized in cases where certain areas, certain districts have been marginalized due to the ravages of nature. And Mr. Speaker, I must say though that it is unfortunate that in some instances with these acquisitions and with these vestings in the National Housing Corporation, the true intention of Parliament is not met in many situations. We have a situation in Lancaster as a good example, where land was a similar vesting, Mr. Speaker, where land was acquired for housing purposes. The land was then vested in the National Housing Corporation, and for some strange reason, the land was then utilized for commercial purposes. So land which was acquired for poor people, where there were limitations with respect to the price. I think at the time, the market price was supposed to be about $5 a square foot, ended up in the hands of business persons, and the value of that land at that time when the land was purchased was $35 a square foot. I would like to say that the situation has even got a little worse in that a recent arrangement has been made with another business vendor to purchase that land at $90 per square foot. Now I say this because I would hope that we could go back to the existing policy where when land has been acquired for one purpose, it is utilized for that purpose, and it would not be necessary to change the legislation, although because of what transpired under the last administration, it may very well be that out of an abundance of caution we might have to ensure that when land is acquired by the Crown for one purpose, it cannot be utilized for another purpose. And this land will not undergo that type of exploitation which has happened at Lancaster. I would also like to mention too that this land comes within, within the perimeters of the plans of the National Housing Corporation, in that we were looking at lands at various places throughout the length and breadth of Barbados for similar development for sites and services. It is hoped that we would be able to have this subdivision approximately, from what I see here, it can accommodate about 200 lots, and it would be able to ease the present housing situation in Barbados. I do not see any proposals on this particular development for housing estates, but at the moment there's a very serious problem with respect to satisfying the needs of individuals who would like housing in housing estates. That aspect of the housing market has been depleted somewhat because of the 20-year program which the government, the past government entered into. While there was nothing wrong with the sale of the units to the tenants who had been occupying or who had been renting these units for more than 20 years, I think that they did not actually put the type of conditions or the strictures so to avoid persons from exploiting the situation by leaving the units unoccupied, paying for the units, leaving the units unoccupied, and leaving the island. A number of requests have been made or are being made more on a daily basis. There are about 30,000 applications the National Housing has as I speak, and they're continuing daily. You probably get about 10 a day, and if you multiply that by 365, you know the amount of applications you would get in a year. But unfortunately, because of that 20-year program and the strictures, the fact that there were no restrictions on that program, it means that once you qualify, the unit could remain vacant, even though you have other persons waiting for units. So it is hoped that if, even though the decision has not been made, I don't know if this might be an area. I haven't actually got the opportunity to actually visit the area. But in the event that we embark on a program for housing units, we would ensure that at least we cover those loopholes so that you would not have any problems with respect to the tenants in the future being allocated or rather taking advantage of any decision by government to allow them to own the property for rents paid, and they don't actually live in the house. Mr. Speaker, I think that I've covered most of what I wanted to say in this debate, and with those few remarks, I ask that this resolution do not pass.
Member for St. George North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to this vesting resolution in the National Housing Corporation. The National Housing Corporation is an entity that has provided substantial support over many years for the people of Barbados, especially the lower income earners. Over the years, a number of programs have been initiated to give poor people the opportunity not only to own homes, but also to rent homes for the satisfaction of that particular interest group. And of course, it was established at a time when the need for housing was indeed very elastic. Over the years, a number of persons, as I said before, have got that opportunity to own homes. And a number of programs over the years have been established to empower people to own a piece of the rock, as is stated over time. Owning a piece of rock is important for our culture. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that over the years, if there was only one investment an individual had, was in a home. And Barbadians' ownership is on the increase we have seen a situation where home ownership in Barbados has risen, especially in the period between 1994 and 2008, to more than 100%, so that home ownership is on the increase. Over the past decade, before May 24th, we have seen a decline in ownership of homes. And even though mortgage rates have increased, we notice that the private sector have been able to satisfy some of this demand. There are a number of persons in the private sector, Mr. Speaker, who are now into construction. There are a number of private developers who are doing a service for the Crown. But the National Housing Corporation must see its role as providing for the lowest or the lower income groups. And the minister has made the point that when a development is earmarked for a particular interest group, the lower sector of our community, then it must remain. I would like to see a return to that philosophy, that the persons at the lowest end should continue to get some form of relief, because it is that at that level that a number of persons cannot, Mr. Speaker, a number of persons cannot do things themselves. The number of persons, young people especially, who for some reason got a job and they need a home, but it is difficult even to obtain a home in the private sector. And therefore the National Housing Corporation must return vigorously to satisfy that particular sector. There are a number of persons who turn up at the National Housing Corporation on a daily basis but cannot find solutions. I remember 2 years ago, while in opposition, I told my constituents from this parliament not to go down to National Housing. I told them at the time, Mr. Speaker, if National Housing was a waste of time, that they should not go. And the reason why I said that then was because people go there on a Tuesday, every Tuesday. You leave work to go to National Housing every Thursday, because that's where most people go to get some form of release. But having gone there continuously every week, they found no solution. And it was a burden on me, because people will come to me on my clinics. I go on to National Housing day after day. I leave my work and without solution. And I believe then, I noticed that there have been changes, and the minister have made the point that we must return to satisfy that particular interest group. We must be able to provide opportunity for them. And how do we do it? I would like to see, Mr. Speaker, that the National Housing Corporation not only re-establish that unit for consumer. I would like to see National Housing re-establish that unit where they look after the consumer, where they look after that class. And how do they do it? They must put somebody who understands why people come to the National Housing Corporation in the first place. They must put somebody there who understands and emphasizes in the plight of the poor. And we need to take a pause at this juncture. And the reason why I intervene here is because members of Parliament must see and must observe what is happening in our community. They must also, Mr. Speaker, look at the historical perspective of why we are here. And I must say that I came to Parliament in order to stop poor people from being poor, to help poor people from being poor, to intervene on their behalf. That's why we are here. Out of the struggle, the way black people became the government in 1951, the struggles of the 1937 riots, we must remember that. And because of those struggles, Mr. Speaker, when the Moyne Commission was set up, it was established primarily to see, to observe, to examine why people struggle in those early years. And housing and employment creation was paramount. Out of the Moyne Commission, Mr. Speaker, the report highlighted housing, derelict housing, persons living on dirt floor, no roofs, no water toilet facilities. People lived in horror. I am saying that after almost 80 years, there are still people who still live in horror. There are people who still live as though there is no tomorrow. There are people who still cannot find decent homes in our society. And I want to also address those things because we started a program while in government. The Labour Party has always been the champion of the poor. We have always been. And if you look at the history of this great party, and that's one of the reasons why I joined this political party. Because out of the 1937 riots, the National Housing Corporation was formed, Housing Authority, to provide relief for the poor. And that's where it started. A lot of housing schemes were started. We had the various units being set up in the Pine, Grisettes, St. John, St. Michael, all across Barbados. The early forefathers, the early government of the Labour Party did. And throughout the years, the Labour Party and the government, most governments of the day, established the housing schemes for the poor, and we have them in our midst. Ferniehurst, the Pine, the Farm, and all across Barbados. In our time, we established recently the London Bournes, the Flat Rock, the ones in St. James, Haynesville, and we established those for the poor. Over time, it was agreed that persons who were living in those units for 20 years or more, that they should get the conveyance for those property. And to my mind, that was not a bad decision. The decision was to provide those tenants with the conveyance so that they can own those homes. But over the last decade, even though we had agreed to that, some degree of enfranchisement, some degree of empowerment for those people, a number of persons have not received the conveyance to those homes. And I think that we need to get back to that program. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a situation that a number of persons within Barbados who want to own something cannot because there's not enough land. Land was provided by the National Housing Corporation under Sites and Service programs. That in itself was a good program. Many people were able, middle class people were able to find some form of housing as well as the poor. Over time, these programs have helped. But within the last decade or so, many persons were unable to do so. And we have that situation today where the backlog has continued to escalate, that we need to pay closer attention to that group, the income group, and to that group that really is in need of finding some form of housing. After so many years, there are still persons with pit toilets that really we need to empower those people. We need to eradicate the pit toilet. And our manifesto of 2018, our manifesto this year spoke to the fact that we want to put a dent and eradicate this group once and for all. And I want to congratulate the government's program. I want to say it is a program in which we can identify with, but we need to see some work being done. It is 5 months, still early, but I would like to see a program. Even though we are in structural adjustment on the IMF program, I believe that something has to be done to help those persons who cannot now obtain bathroom facilities, cannot get loans in the bank to improve themselves. The number of persons cannot go to the bank because obviously they're not, some of them are not working. And of course, you know, the banking institution today only take persons who have some form of security of tenure as far as work is concerned. But there are still a number of persons, Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, and I believe across Barbados and yours too, Mr. Speaker, where they would want to upgrade their homes. Too many of our people still live on the edge. And I would want to see the government set up that unit as quickly as possible under the Ministry of Housing and Lands and Rural Development, where a unit not necessarily run by civil servants, and a unit not necessarily run by persons who cannot empathize with the poor, but run by, in that ministry, to look after, to make sure that they go in the field, Mr. Speaker, to see where these housing units, where these poor houses exist, and let us eradicate them once and for all. And the reason why I say so, because too many of our established units, established departments, they go into the field, and I don't want to single out any particular department of government, but there are people who cannot get service. And you can only get service if somebody say, get a letter from a politician. You can only get service if you know somebody. We have to eradicate this thinking. If a man does not have toilet, give him one. He has to be provided with one. We need, Mr. Speaker, a unit, not necessarily, and I believe it should be run by this Parliament. I believe take it out of the realm of politics. Take it out of the realm of politics. There's no person in Barbados who want a toilet facility should have to undergo this form of treatment. And there must be officers coming around to examine to see where these people live. I have a few, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, because I have been doing my check. We have a few in Rose Village, St. George. We have a few in Appomattox. We have a few in Constant. We have a few in Glebe. We have a few in Lower State. We have a few in Newbury. We have a few across St. George. I believe in every constituency we have persons who cannot get, who still have pit toilets. And not only this, person cannot repair their homes either. There are lots of people cannot go to the bank to get a loan because they are not working, or they may only be working for 2 or 3 days a week. That unit must be set up and established right quickly. And I would like to see it established in a way that persons don't have to come to their member parliament. You have a need, make sure that need is fulfilled by the government. And I want it to be done within the first 3 years of this administration. That's one. Across Barbados, across St. Michael, I made the point during the last election that we need to treat St. Michael as a special case. When I was Minister of Housing, I fought for the IIDB program, the Housing Neighborhood Upgrade Program, that brought in millions of dollars here, and the last government sent back the money. The last government sent back that money into the coffers of the IIDB. And what happened? We didn't upgrade green fields, we didn't upgrade Castle, we didn't upgrade none of the one in St. Thomas's Island View. Nothing happened. I know it's going to be more difficult for us to obtain funds, but Mr. Speaker, I want to see that a program revised, homegrown program. We got to find the money. We have to make the sacrifice for that category of people. And what about the house fires? In recent times, we have had a lot of house fires. What has been called? What is the cause? Again, I spoke recently on the need for the Tongue Talent Department and the Ministry of Housing and all the various social ministries like welfare and National Assistance Board to get together to see the cause. What are the causes of these house fires? Is it because the electricity need to be upgraded? Is it because people are careless? What are the causes of these house fires within recent times? But again, Mr. Speaker, the National Housing Corporation, when these people go to the National Housing Corporation, they expect to find a house. Sometimes it is difficult. It is very difficult, Mr. Speaker, for persons to obtain a housing unit. No. If there's a fire, it's going to be difficult. And not because they don't have any units. They don't have any units. But it's a difficult task for the minister at this time. But I know there used to be a fund within the Ministry of Housing and Lands, Mr. Speaker. There used to be units set up where persons who had a fire, a calamity or something of that nature could obtain some form of funding to obtain a temporary housing for a period of time. And we would want to see the minister reestablish that fund in order to help poor people if there's no housing unit, because we do not want our people to sleep on the streets. We are too sophisticated. We have come a long way, and we want to see that unit reestablished within the Ministry of Housing and Lands in order to help our people get through that period. People going to the welfare, Mr. Speaker, after a fire for clothing, some form of furniture and so on. It's a difficult task because they don't have the money. And we would want to see the social ministries come together, put their heads together to see how we can help these people in case of a fire, in case of homelessness. We had established years ago a home at Lancaster for temporary, for persons who had problems, either domestic problems with their home, with a husband or wife, problems with where a lady had to run from her husband or vice versa. These things were done in order to help take care of the family. I mean, we would want to see a situation where we provide more help. We also look at, years ago we did one at Sergeant Village for the elderly. I believe that the social ministries need to come together to look at how we can provide temporary relief for the poor and those persons who are in need of housing. I would also want to encourage the minister to look and be bold, be aggressive because we know that he had a very successful stint in the early years at the Ministry of Housing and Lands when he was able to acquire a number of parcels of land at Lancaster and indeed throughout Barbados. And I know that his thinking, if there's one person in here, I know that the thinking of the minister is in the right place, that he wants to ensure that poor people get a chance. And I want to see a vigorous and aggressive program within the Ministry of Housing and Lands where we can have lots of land being acquired again to provide relief for that sector. We have land at Lower Estate, which I would want to invite the minister to visit, where you can provide lots of house spots and for the poor and for middle income, and especially persons who are striving to get along in the middle income group, like policemen, nurses, teachers, and so on, where housing development can take place. And then we were fortunate at the time, Mr. Speaker, in the early years, to provide in every housing development for persons who have had disability. In the early years, in every housing development, we provided opportunities for the disabled, for the indigent, and so on. Every housing development, we decided that some of it must go towards a variety of people, persons with different abilities. And we saw what happened in the Glebe. We saw what happened at Constant Phase 1, where persons of different class, different income group came together to form a holistic community. And we want to see that continue. We would like to see that continue, Mr. Speaker. I also want to draw the minister's attention to the development that took place years ago in 2002. From this parliament, we acquired land at Market Hill, Hamlin's development, which have not been paid for. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that when you acquire people's property, they should be compensated. Mr. Hamlin, after 16 years, have not been compensated for his land, and he's getting old. He came to my clinic a couple of weeks ago, a man almost blind, has not been compensated. Last government decided that they were taking their time on it. I want to encourage the minister that when land has been acquired from the private sector, they should be compensated. The Land Acquisition Act, GAP 228, allows the Ministry of Housing to acquire for public purpose any land for a public purpose, be it roads or housing, or for anything once the government deem it a public purpose. But compensation is the key. Persons must be compensated in a timely manner. It takes too long. Whether we understand the private treaty nature, where you pay maybe quickly after, but the Land Acquisition Act does not have a specified time. And we want to see the minister encourage his department to look at that act to see where we can do a number of changes to ensure that private people, when they part with the land, that they are compensated. We understand that sometimes the ministry may not have money and they might want to give back the person the land after a few years. But then what happened? A person who has a part with his land for 10 years before it can't be used must be compensated as well. So you have to look, there's a fine line between that time of compensation if you want to return the land or if you want to keep it for public purpose. So we need to look.
The honourable member has 2 more minutes.
Thank you. So that, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the Ministry of Housing and Lands have the capacity today, and I'm glad to see the minister have reestablished a unit under a senior person to follow what is happening and to return us to a situation of glory days. I would want to encourage him to continue the program to help the poor, the general workers, low and fund. I haven't spoken about that, but I must compliment him as well. In his day at the ministry, he was able to lend millions of dollars in the general workers loan fund for the poor people. And he was criticized, but of course the people did not criticize him. Persons were able to get $5,000, $10,000 to repair their homes at Christmas time. I would like to see that happen again, where persons put money in the general workers loan fund where people can repair their homes. There's still a number of derelict properties, as I said before, that some people will want a $5,000, $10,000 in order to to strengthen the roof, the floor, and to put some windows in. I would like to see that program again. Of course, we do not have much money, but I would like to encourage him. Housing is important, but we need to ensure that people get some form of financing for it. I want to see this society, and I want to close by saying, I believe that we must all be inspired. We must all be inspired by the whole notion that we need to stop poor people from being poor. Housing is essential. Housing is important. But our program, of the tenantries program, which we talked about before, I'm not talking about that yet. I'll come back in the next debate. But we need to see that General Workers Loan Fund and the Ministry of Housing and Lands re-establish themselves as the premier institution to help poor people from being poor, especially as far as housing is concerned. I'm obliged to you.
The honourable member for St. John.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this resolution this morning because I am intimately aware of the needs of persons within the constituency of St. John to at some point in time have their own home as well. And this was brought home forcibly on Wednesday when the Prime Minister and the Honourable Member for St. Andrew did a tour to the Bath/Welsh community in St. John and had a first-hand look at the situation in that particular community as it relates to the unfortunate situation of persons having to maybe erect structures without the requisite approval. And the fact that it is continuing at that particular location, Mr. Speaker, is a clear indication that not only in the last 10 years, but probably the last 2 decades, no housing solution was brought to the constituency of St. John to benefit persons in a meaningful way. Now, we have a situation in St. John where, yes, the 500 lots program is active in a couple of communities in St. John, but the reality is that a lot of those persons who are occupying lots and would have built houses during that program are not from St. John. So I am hoping that not in the not too distant future that a resolution too will come to this August chamber indicating that lands in the constituency of St. John will be earmarked for housing solutions. And the reality is that I already have those locations earmarked, Mr. Speaker, when that time comes around. Because I believe that if we're talking about housing in the 21st century and we're talking about housing solutions in general, then those persons in the rural constituency, not only mine in St. John, should benefit from such an initiative. Now, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew mentioned, which is a fact, that we have a waiting list right now, obviously in excess of 30,000 people waiting, lining up for housing solutions. And in our manifesto, it is documented that we have 15,000 unoccupied properties in this country that we should be able to retrofit and to press into action as it relates to housing solutions. We have a further 20,000 houses that are vacant that we too should be able to trigger some kind of development to lower that 30,000, because if you add the two of those together, that's 35,000 housing solutions that should be readily available to persons within Barbados. The reality is, like I would have mentioned on Tuesday, the fact is that the ministry / the National Housing Corporation is practically bankrupt because of the actions of the last administration. And that is the reality that we're facing within the ministry, Mr. Speaker. That there are no funds really to acquire land to trigger housing units. We would now have to look at private-public partnerships in order to have a startup again of housing solutions in this country. And I'm aware that there are a number of persons who would have expressed an interest because there were meetings and different things that happened within the ministry. Persons who are interested in doing exactly that. It's just a matter of time before some of those projects probably will come on stream. But we understand the need, because if you look at the housing areas such as Silver Hill, Gore Hill, and Grisettes, the Pine, we understand that there's significant overcrowding in those particular developments. And part of the process of triggering this acquisition of land to start new housing program is to rectify that problem and to mitigate the problem that we're having with overcrowding in such communities. But we can only do that if funds are available. And not to dwell on the fact, but you must remind the public that with those 3,000 houses being donated or given, to persons, that there is a serious situation within the Ministry of Cash Flow. There's a major problem. And I'm hoping that the same green paper that we recently debated in this chamber will also factor into any housing solutions that are coming in St. John, because we recognize from all that is happening that there's a need for recreational facilities within rural Barbados, for sure within the constituency of St. John. And if it is a case where land is being earmarked in St. John for housing developments, and we have major industrial development happening, i.e. the construction of hotels and such, then I am hoping that we can benefit from that planning obligations, where in those areas that are being earmarked by myself for housing solutions, that we can start the process or trigger the process by having 1 or 2 play parks in that particular location. One of the things that, again, we're looking for, one of the things highlighted in our manifesto is the fact that we will not now be just constructing units for persons, but these units must be hurricane resilient. The design must not be the ones that obtained before, because, again, we understand that those hurricanes that are coming from off the African coast are now at a stage that if our buildings, if our housing stock is not at a level that we can withstand, then it is a case where we will be spinning top in mud and be constantly re-engaging in housing solutions and building houses in Barbados. So I fully support the resolution because in the constituency where this portion of land is being earmarked, I am sure that not only persons from within that constituency will benefit. Similarly, when it reaches St. John, I am sure that the population in St. John then will become a little more eclectic because we will be bringing persons from several different constituencies to live in St. John and to enjoy all the fresh air that there is in St. John and whatever there is in St. John. So I really have no difficulties. I heard the Honourable Member mention about the pit toilets, and yes, we have that situation in St. John that hopefully will be soon rectified when our program is coming on place. And obviously with the new housing solution, this will not be the case. But I am particularly concerned about the situation that obtained in Welch, because we have persons who are constantly clearing land in that particular locale to construct houses under the belief that the fact that I have a foundation in place, I will automatically get land whenever those persons with the Freehold Tenantry Act is benefiting as well. And that really is not the situation. So Bath is one of those areas that is Crown land, is one of those areas where the Prime Minister and the Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew would have indicated that yes, we are going to have some issues in terms of how we treat to maybe the closeness of houses, but solutions will come to those persons in Welch, and I am promising those persons on the floor of the House today that solutions will come real soon to that particular location. Mr. Speaker, I believe, like I said, that in St. John, for the past maybe 30, 40 years, the last development in St. John triggered by the National Housing Corporation would have been the development at Coach Hill. And similar to a lot of the houses that are having issues with wiring and plumbing and all that kind of stuff, same thing obtained. The fact that the houses are so small and you have 1 and 2 and 3 generations living within the household, then it is time that we acquire land in St. John to sort that process. And I wholeheartedly support this, and I'm hoping that in the not too distant future, either the Honourable Member for St. Andrew or myself bring a similar resolution to obtain land in St. John. With those few words, I am obliged.
Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise to add my contribution to this debate as it relates to the vesting of land at Chancery Lane in the parish of Christchurch. And indeed, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew said to the Honourable House that this is an old resolution from the last administration. And indeed, we recognize the need as a government to clean up issues from the past and also to make sure that we as a government continue to provide affordable housing for all. I heard the Honourable Member for St. John, and he spoke to the whole matter of hurricane preparedness and the whole matter to have housing solutions in St. John as well. And I'm certain that every single member within this chamber will speak, or when they get it, they'll speak to housing solutions that are needed in their respective constituencies. But I wish to speak, Mr. Speaker, on the whole issue of a backlog of housing requests within the Ministry of Housing. And we all know it as we do our clinics weekly in the constituencies. We know most of the requests that come to us are requests relating to housing. Whether it's low-income housing or it's middle-income housing, the requests are many. and in abundance. As we, the 30 members in this chamber, including the member for St. Michael West, he too, he has his requests as well, and I know he will speak to that. But something that was mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, I think by both ministers of housing, the honourable members for St. Andrew and for St. John, they spoke about the aspect of this government not being able to afford to build houses on their own. So the role of the government will transition, or has transitioned, from being a housing provider to an enabler. And that is fundamental. The role of government has transitioned from being a housing provider to an enabler, simply because we do not have the money, and we know that the National Housing Corporation, and it is no secret, the public knows because we provide the information to show that these state-owned enterprises are indeed bankrupt. And that's the role of government, to be an enabler to ensure that we have good housing solutions. And it is perhaps the best time, as we approach the weekend before our conference, to speak about the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, and the member for St. John mentioned it briefly. But we recognize that this government, indeed, successive governments under the Barbados Labour Party, we have focused on providing housing solutions, affordable housing solutions, whether they are for low-income earners or middle-income earners. And we can go around again the country and we can list in the various areas from St. Andrew to St. George, and I know that there are none in St. Lucie, because I know the honourable member for St. Lucie, when he gets his chance, he will speak to the need for housing in St. Lucie. Right? The honourable member Peter Phillips. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, but we have to recognize the time has come where public-private partnerships will become the way, or the modus operandi, as we seek to build out the housing solutions in this country. So an integrated approach, Mr. Speaker, must be used not just to provide housing, but when we must seek to ensure that we address issues of drainage and sewage. Make sure we have adequate drainage systems and sewage systems. And indeed, that quality assurance must be featured in this modern day as we seek to provide housing solutions with the private entities. And I too can speak to an abundance of land situated in the parish and constituencies of St. George. And the honourable member for St. George, he spoke and he represented himself extremely well as it relates to the need for housing solutions within the areas, and he mentioned a few. And I too can boast that I have probably the most available land in this country. And the member for St. Michael's South, he needs some, but I have the most available land for housing solutions in this country.
You are the constituency of St. George South. Honourable member, yourself or the constituency of St. George South? Yourself, sir?
The honourable member for Christchurch South, yes, it's the constituency of St. George South. No, I can wait. Leave me. This needs to be televised. My people are here.
The Honourable
Thanks, Terry. House
be suspended until 11:15. Sorry, 11:45.
And the rationale for that, Honourable Member?
Apparently, sir, the video workings,
Technical issues.
yeah, technical issues that might need about 15 minutes to be resolved. Thank you.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until 11:45 a.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. This House stands suspended until 11:45.